This is episode 2 of the best water cooling cases. And in today's episode, we're going to talk about the very famous Lian Li O11 Dynamic XL version. So let's get started. Hey guys, Tiago with Classical Technology here. Thank you for joining me for another video. Remember to smash that like button, subscribe if you like my content, and leave a comment below. Alright, so let's talk about my next favorite water cooling case, and that's going to be the Lian Li Dynamic O11 the XL version. Now, a lot that I say about this particular version will also apply to the regular size Lian Li Dynamic, the O11 version, but this one, just keep in mind, it has more room for radiators, which actually makes a tremendous difference, so they're really not the same. It's not just about the size. This one will give you better cooling performance, but we'll touch on that later as well. We'll basically talk about the aesthetics, the performance, and then overall sort of the durability and sort of how long the case has lasted and its build and its material quality, as I've had it, for a while now. I built it last year, so that way I'll have a pretty good idea of everything that's gone down. So first, let's tackle the aesthetics. Now, it's no surprise that this case is an absolute favorite. Going from the original model, that's the smaller version, to this one, the only difference is this one's a little bit larger, but in terms of the aesthetics and how they look, they're very similar from a distance, and it's no surprise that it's been pretty much the most popular water cooling case recently. If you go to Reddit or any forum with PC building cases, so many people have done builds in this that they do start to, aesthetically sort of blend a little bit, and it's not as unique as it once was, but that still doesn't discredit how awesome that this case looks. Now, you can really build it in any way that you want when you're doing water cooling. You could even put a traditional reservoir here, but definitely a really cool thing to take advantage of is to do one of these distribution plates. Both EK Water Blocks and Bits Power, as well as a few other companies, make a plate that you can put in the back that have a integrated pump. Usually it's going to be some type of DDC pump. There's also a front panel plate for the original Lian Li Dynamic, and aesthetically this just looks absolutely amazing. Not to mention it's pretty practical too. It's easier to drain, and I just really like working with these water distribution panels. I just think they make everything a lot more nicely integrated and simple, and it looks really cool, and you get to do a lot of neat little things like with parallel tubing and making sure everything just like lines up really nicely. Often it's not the easiest thing to do because, believe it or not, on the CPU block and on the water distribution panel, it doesn't always line up 100%, so you may have a little bit of a sag, but you can make up for it by using different fittings and things of that nature. But in general, aesthetically, this case is an absolute home run, and this is one of those cases that if you don't know if you really love the aesthetic by now, most likely you won't. It's been around for a while, but in general, I think it's safe to say when you do a nice water cooling build in this, it's very, very nice. Like, people really love it. You can see your design from the front because there's a tempered glass panel there, from the side with a traditional tempered glass panel. So it really is a case that gives you a tremendously good view inside your components. In my opinion, it's definitely one of the most stunning looking water cooling cases, especially when you consider the price. It's not ridiculously expensive. The XL version is less than $200, with the original version being a good $60 to $70 less. So overall, aesthetically, a home run of a case. Now let's touch on performance, and this is where I really think the XL version tremendously exceeds the original version. I was never able to put together a build that I was completely happy with the original Lian Li Dynamic, just because I felt like there were too many space restrictions with the amount of radiators that I could use, especially when using the back panel water distribution block. For example, if I wanted to do a vertical GPU, I couldn't really easily fit a radiator on the bottom of the case, while in the XL version, I can easily do a vertical GPU, like I have a 2080 Ti mounted vertically. I also have a really thick radiator on the bottom with fans and a nice size radiator on the top. So I'd feel that, like, performance-wise, the little bit of extra room that this case has really makes a tremendous difference, because where does it equate to in the performance? If you have more radiator space and more fans, it means that you can generally run everything quieter. Of course, there are diminishing returns. The more radiators that you add doesn't always equate to a tremendous increase in performance, but it does equate to making sure that your water temperature stays really cool and everything's at a low noise level. If you only had one radiator in here, you're going to have to run those fans higher to get anywhere near the same performance. So with this much radiator space, you can run lower RPM fans. Here I actually have the EK, the really thick Meltemi fans, running on the top, and on the bottom ML fans, which they both have really good static pressure, and they're really silent. In fact, the most loud thing in this case is going to be that pump. That's the only thing performance-wise that I think this case could do with an upgrade. I mean, I'm cooling the 2080 Ti as well as a 14-core Intel processor, and that's some pretty beefy specs, and generally I'd like to use at least one D5 pump, sometimes two, to cool components like this. But in this case, I use basically just a pump that came with that Bits Power water distribution block, which, while it's okay, it's definitely really noisy when it's at 100%, and you really want it to be running like that when you want to make sure you're getting the best cooling performance. So in the future, as I do another revision of this build performance-wise, that's one thing that I watch out for. Now they have newer water distribution blocks like this that you can actually put a more powerful DDC pump or even a D5 pump. There are a couple of companies that make it that you should be able to fit it in this case as well. So if you're building in this case, that's one thing to keep in mind. Some of these water distribution panels, they don't necessarily, at least the older ones, they didn't come with the best pump possible. Some of them weren't even a DDC pump. So I'd just be careful, because that's going to equate to how much noise you're making. If you have a D5 pump, as long as you keep vibrations to a minimum in the case, it's definitely going to be your best performing and quieter option, especially when you have a lot of 90-degree bends and turns. So that's one thing performance-wise that I may look to upgrade in this case. Just make sure that it has, a sufficient pump. I even thought about adding a second pump somewhere in the loop, but we'll see in the future. But the performance isn't bad with the integrated pump in that Bits Power block. It's just a little bit noisier than I'd like. And let's talk about the last consideration with build quality and other conveniences. This case is really nicely designed. In the back, there's more than enough space for cable management. There's a nice little retention bar that goes that you can sort of hide your cables. There's more than enough room for your power supply. Airflow everywhere is really good from the bottom. The airflow going through the top radiator is really good. In the back, you also have different slots for airflow. So in general, everything is really nicely thought out. In fact, if you want to use this case as a water cooling, system, but with like a video editing rig or something like that, you can fit a lot of hard drives in without compromising any other space. Because in the back, you have these little caddies that are really cool. You can put in, regular 7200 RPM drives or even, SSD drives. Very easy to access. You can open it from the back. It doesn't seem to really take up too much room because the way the case is designed, it's like a dual chamber design. So you have that flexibility where it's a really awesome water cooling case, but you can also use it as like a serious workstation. Have your hard drives sort of in the back. Usually you have to compromise. If you want a really cool water cooling rig, you got to remove all those hard drive bays. But because this dual chamber design, you can actually make it happen. So that's pretty cool about this case. That's one of the things that I really like about the XL version versus the original. The original was pretty cool, at the time it was innovative, really nicely designed, nicely priced. but this larger version just takes it to the next level when you're doing water cooling and gives you so many better options. Another main point that I'm really happy with in this case has been the build quality over time. The initial version, I'll be honest, there are a couple of things in it that just felt a little bit cheaper. For some reason, this case, it's just built with better quality materials. It is at a more expensive price point, but I just feel like the build and the quality of materials are better, and it truly feels like a high-end case where you can put in expensive components and not feel cheap. For example, in the original dynamic version, the glass panels just didn't feel as expensive. Even like the top panel and the different materials felt cheaper. This one feels in general a little bit heavier, more substantial. It feels like things are better designed. It just looks better all around, and I'm really happy for that. So overall, I can highly recommend this case. I think it's one of the best cases out on the market, period, for water cooling, because not only do you actually have the room to get a very high performing water cooling system, you also have the ability to make it aesthetically super appealing. You could do your water distribution block in the back or in the front. You could do a traditional reservoir and pump and put a radiator in the back. So you have a lot of options. Radiator on the bottom, on the top. You have a lot more options in a case like this than you previously had with a smaller version. So I think in performance, in aesthetics, and in build quality, it's absolutely an amazing case for under $200. And if you even like the aesthetic, if it's not an issue for you, I think I would go ahead and build in this. If it's going to be your first water cooling build or something like that, you will not be disappointed. It's a fantastic water cooling case. Alright guys, thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. This is the second video in the water cooling cases series. Stay on the lookout for the next video coming soon. Remember to subscribe, smash that like button, leave a comment below, and I'll see you guys on the next video.